Yeah, so as Sam let you know, I have my own business, Rock That Creative Job. I was in the creative industry for 20 years. I started out as a graphic designer and then moved my way up, most recently being head of a creative department. And, I really struggled to find great career advice when I was, kind of coming up through my career. And I never could get advice that was specific. So I wanted to pivot during the pandemic when I realized so many people needed help, they needed direction, and they wanted to, move into the creative space. So I pivoted away from advertising and started this business to help everyone. So thank you for joining me. I'm going to tell you about my experience graduating 20 years ago in a very sort of, scary economic time. I graduated, my last semester was during the September 11th terrorist attacks in the US. And I was going to school in New York at the time. And while I wasn't in the city where the attacks happened, it was pretty scary to be just a couple of hours away, literally in a classroom when the planes flew into the Twin Towers. And so I knew that was going to change the course of how I navigated my post-graduation, job finding approach. A lot of things are similar to then that are going on now. There's this global market damage, obviously from the last 2 years from the pandemic. There's been layoffs. There's been, the travel industry was pretty much gutted for a long time. There was very limited travel. No one really knew how things were going to get back to normal. There was inflation, oil prices were going up. All of these things were happening 20 years ago. And as I started to develop the outline for, kind of talking to people about my experience to help them, I realized that there were a lot of similarities. I mean, it was really apples to apples. So, if you're nervous about graduating, I completely understand. I've been there, and I want you to know that it's okay. It's okay to be scared. So I can take you through sort of what happened to me after my graduation. I was afraid. I was really fearful of not being able to get my foot in the door. And I had gone to college for 6 years. I switched my major a few times and finally came out in graphic design. And I really, really wanted to work in an agency or some type of team and do design work. That was my goal in life. So after graduation, fear was a big motivator for me. And I decided, okay, I need to stand out. I need people to recognize me as a creative thinker and not just a designer. And so I developed this plan for myself, and I gave myself a deadline. I operated my self-promotional approach like a business. And I thought, I'm gonna have a brief, I'm gonna have a strategy, and I'm going to have a deadline, and I'm going to move through this and create something that helps me stand out. And, there was no social media back then. So you're kind of going in pretty blind. It was literally, you got the phone book out and you looked up, all the agencies that had huge ads, or, there was, in the city I lived in, there was like a top 20. And so I got that, and it was like, okay, I am going to approach every organization that I'm interested in working with, whether it's an agency or an in-house marketing team. I just really knew I wanted to be somewhere that was interesting and was going to, give me the experience that I wanted as a new designer. So I created the self-promotional package, and I actually have it here because my mom kept it in her attic for the last 20 years, and it's pretty musty smelling, but I created this tin that's called Creative Wax. And there's this little caricature of me on the front. And because there were no websites, people didn't have their portfolios online. So it was difficult, So what I did was I created this tin because I wanted something that matched the CD shape. And so in the bottom of these was a CD with all of my work on it. I also had my business card in there. And then I had a little like wax pad that you would use to like put wax on your car that I stamped my initials into. And all of this went in a box with a resume that I created like a brochure, actually. And I had no experience, I had projects that I did for people I knew, businesses that I knew, but I didn't have any actual job experience. So I created my resume like a brochure just to have it stand out. And then I packaged 25 of these and sent them out. And, what I was trying to do really was just think outside the box. How can I get someone's attention? How can I let them know that I am, someone who can solve problems for them, someone who can go the extra mile, someone who puts extra effort into things, because that is what a hiring manager wants to see. So I sent these out, and then I did my rounds of cold calls a week later. And that was one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever done in my life. I was probably 23, and I would just pick up the phone and call these agency owners, these senior creative directors, people who, had been in advertising for a couple decades. And I would say, hey, I sent you this thing. Would you have time to meet with me? I'd love to hear about your agency, and I'd love some feedback on my work. And, I'm interested to know more about what you do. And the people that I reached, I got those meetings every single time. And so it was really being personable, focused, and sending them something that would help them remember who you were. That was the goal. Is when I called, I wanted them to know who I was based on what I sent. And as soon as I said, oh, I sent you, the promotional package with the wax can, they were like, oh yes, it's great. I haven't looked at your portfolio, or maybe they had, and we would just kind of go from there. So it was an opener for the conversation because it was something that was different. So from that point on, I had a lot of interviews, and, a lot of people, because everyone was having difficulties finding jobs, people that I knew, my friends, family, they said, I don't know if you're going to find a job in design. Maybe you should just take something else. I was working in a jewelry store, almost full time at that point. I was working part-time during college, and I thought, I don't want to do this. I want to do design work. I want to work in the creative industry. And so I just kept going, and I just didn't listen to other people. It was like, no, this is the plan for my life. My plan is not to work at a jewelry store. My plan is to actually do creative work professionally. So I just kept going, and I ended up within the first 6 weeks, after sending out all of these packages, doing all my cold calls, having all my conversations, I got an offer at an agency, a smaller agency. And, I went through 2 rounds of interviews there. I ended up with the offer, and I turned it down. And much to the dismay of my parents, who were like, what are you doing? Because no one is getting a job right now. You have 0 experience, and now you've turned your job down. What your one chance to, do something that you love. But I knew, it wasn't that I didn't want to start at the bottom. It was that I knew that the role that they were hiring me into, which was a junior designer role, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what I was looking for. It wouldn't allow me to do the things that I felt like I really wanted to do. It was very focused on a lot of heavy sort of production work. It really kind of pigeonholed me, and the environment that it was in, I really didn't feel like I had a great vibe from it. It felt like, it might be something that wouldn't feel like a fun place to come to work, or something that was going to help me develop and support me as a designer. And I thought, I know I have to start at the bottom, but this doesn't feel like the bottom that I want. And so I turned it down, and I had those feelings like, this doesn't feel right. But everyone was telling me, just go to the second interview. It's going to be great. You'll get an offer. It'll probably turn out fine. Once you start, that's never the case. If you have that feeling, it's for a reason, and you have to listen to it. And so I turned down the offer, and then I cried for about a week in my apartment. And then I started over with more of these packages. And I thought, I'm just going to keep going. I can't let this derail me. And so I kept going. And in another 6 weeks, I got the offer that I actually accepted. And it was, it kind of met all my sort of values-based goals, which was, it was a small agency. It was women-owned business. It was very hands-on. They were kind of in the second growth spurt. They had been around for 15 years, and they were looking to really revamp. It was connected to the tourism industry, which I was really interested in. And they were trying to rebuild after the terrorist attacks. And so I felt like, yes, this feels mission driven. It feels right. And I was allowed to do so many things in that position. And I stayed there for almost 4 years. And I built a great portfolio. Some of the work that I did, some of the packaging, won awards, some of it, they still use it because their clients still like it. And it's been like 15, 16 years. And so, I felt like I really made an impact. I really helped that business. It felt right. It was this growth that I needed. I was able to do everything from, product packaging design to website design, event materials, promotional collateral, brand identity. It was like, I could, dip my toe in the water of everything. And that really helped me build a significant portfolio. And my second role, I actually got recruited without applying. So, I knew starting out on the right foot was really important because I wanted to be able to move into my career as a designer. And, I moved from that role, which was a graphic designer, to a senior designer. I moved, pretty seamlessly. I got recruited, and, it was so great because I thought, wow, okay, I did the thing I said I was going to do, and it gave me a lot of confidence. And, so throughout that time period, I learned a lot of lessons that I kind of took with me in my career. So I moved from graphic designer to senior designer, and then I was the lead designer, and then I was design manager, art director, and then I went into creative director, senior creative director, and head of creative. And so I had kind of this vision for how I was going to move up in my career. And the lessons that I learned in the beginning, graduating in a really difficult time, having to problem solve and figure things out, those were the ones that helped me with transition points in the rest of my career. I had been laid off. There were restructures in organizations I was in, a variety of different transition points. I'd been promoted. I mean, whether it's good or bad, the transition points can sometimes be difficult. So I wanted to share with you the three things that I really took away from my experience in the beginning of my career, figuring out, how I was going to approach it and where I was going to go. The first one is strategy, not struggle. And, when you understand that you are operating in sort of an anxious state, you're a little scared, you're a little fearful, you're nervous, you can actually use that energy and move it into a better place. And so recognizing that, like, it is okay. Fear is a motivator. It's okay to be anxious and nervous, but what you want to do is you want to take that energy and use it to craft your strategy and not focus on the struggle. So instead of getting worked up about, I'm never going to find a job, I'm just going to lay in my apartment and be sad, I thought, no, I'm going to take this fear and I'm going to do something with it. And I'm going to, make this little production line and craft a million of these things until I find a job, and I learned a lot through that too, because I tweaked things as I talked to people, as I had the conversations, I changed the way I was pitching myself. So, developing that strategy, giving myself a timeline, planning my approach to how I was going to communicate with people, how I was going to reach them and stand out. That really helps. So really focusing on the strategy and not the struggle, because there will always be some type of struggle, is what I learned, because, it changed, the economics changed, but there were periods of my life where, okay, well, there's another recession, or, oh, there's some type of reorganization and things are shifting. There's a merger and acquisition. There's always a struggle that you have to get through. Just in professional life. And so realizing that strategy was more important than struggle and taking that energy, focusing it, that really helped. The second thing is story, not slides. And this one, I really learned this in those cold call conversations, that people wanted to know who I was. They didn't really want to see, they saw the work, great, okay, that's great. Like, they were interested, but they wanted to know who I was as a creative person. And I wasn't really ready for that. I thought, oh, I don't know. I have my pitch down and I'm going to tell you about all my projects. But like talking about who I was felt really uncomfortable and strange. And so I had to kind of like tiptoe into that. And then I realized, oh, this is actually highly valuable. And so recognizing that there is high value in your personal story, that's going to get you far, because it's what sets you apart from people with your exact same skills and experience. And, all of the other people graduating, all of the other, people going for the same roles that you're going for, you want to set yourself apart from them. And that was my goal with the product that I developed and sent out. But what I didn't realize was there was a whole story behind this. They would ask me, oh, well, why did you create, this wax can? Like, what was your thought process there? And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. So I was into like vintage cars, and my family was into vintage cars. And so I had kind of a story about why I felt comfortable creating this automotive style brochure, and that just created this great dialogue, and it made it easier to have these conversations with people. So once I realized, okay, yeah, I can tell people who I am. I don't just need to focus on the work. So what you don't want to do is focus so heavily on your slides that you lose yourself and you're just focused on the product and not like the person creating the product. So you don't want the slides to be disconnected from you as a human. So that was one of the things I learned. And then the last thing I learned, and this is so critical and really important in an interview conversation, you want to selling, not saying. So if you are passively talking about yourself and your skills in a way that doesn't allow someone to connect the dots between what you offer and what they need, you're kind of leaving it up to them to draw their own conclusions, and they might not be the conclusions you want. So making sure you are always considering your audience, you're always considering the values of your audience, you're always showing work that reflects the type of work that they do, the things that they're interested in, things that will help them further their business. They're going to be super excited to talk to you longer because you are figuring out how to connect what you do with what they need. And so that's the crux of selling, right? Selling is about your audience. It's not about you. And once I recognized, if I'm drawing these lines between what I do and what they need continually in the conversation, it creates this really exciting kind of peak dialogue moment that they all of a sudden have that aha where, oh yes, okay, we actually do that here. And that's great that you have those skills, or, oh, I didn't know that, because there are things that are not on your resume that, you might just want to talk about, or you might point something out. I saw something on your website and that really interested me because of this, and because I have experience with that. You want to be connecting those dots for people, because honestly, hiring managers look at so many resumes and so many portfolios that if you sell yourself to them, if you make it clear why you're a great candidate, they're going to remember that, because they're overloaded. And I've hired a lot of designers in the last 15 years. And, I see amazingly talented ones come in and they take me through their work, and I can see the connection with a lot of the things that, we would do in that particular organization and the role that they held, but I'm recognizing that they're not even bringing those up. And so if I wasn't looking for it, I would completely miss it. And, I have this amazing, talented person, and they might miss the opportunity, right, to use their skills in my organization. So it's really important, selling, not saying, and just knowing the values of your audience and being able to articulate what you bring to the table to help their business. That's so critical. And that's the thing that really moved me forward in my career. It got me promoted. It got me into roles that I had never done before. And it's just, you're recognizing what they need, and you're the service provider of that. And that was just really, really helpful for me. So those are the three things that I learned in the very beginning, going through this kind of like graduation crazy time, and then turning down that first job and really learning about how the world works and how people connect with one another, and kind of what they want to see from you as a professional. And so I just wanted to share those with you guys, because I feel like it's very similar to right now, and with the economic climate. So I hope that those are helpful, but those are really the three things that I have used my entire career in all different types of scenarios. And they've just been, if I can focus on that, I get results, I get success. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jamie. If anybody has any questions, by the way, if you want me to read them out, just stick them in the chat. If not, just use the reaction button to just put the hand up, and then I'll ask you to unmute and just ask away. But I just have a few questions actually, Jamie, if that's okay for you.
Of course.
I'm intrigued. How did you turn down that job? What was you,
Mhm.
did you say like, nah, thanks, or?
Yes, I said, I actually was honest. I said, I really appreciate the offer. I don't feel like this role is a great fit for me at this time. And I was grateful for the time that I spent with them. And I just basically said, after giving it very careful consideration, I felt like the role wasn't a fit for me. And I was looking for something a little bit different.
Yeah.
And, it really does pay to be honest, because they could have said, if it was just about the role and not necessarily about the entire environment, they could have said, oh, okay, well, what are you looking for? Maybe there's something else we have, right? So I think, I wanted to let them know this is just how I feel. And they were kind of stunned because, most people coming out of college are like, oh, I'll take whatever. But I thought that's really not the way to go. If you feel wrong about it, I had to listen to myself. So yeah, I was just pretty gracious, and they were very nice about it, and they kind of understood. But yeah, I wanted to be honest with them and let them know, just didn't feel like a fit for me. So
Yeah, that's great.
yeah, it was
Well,
hard.
yeah, I bet. And as you say, like explaining that to your parents and your friends and stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone's cheering you on. They're like, yes, you got the offer. And I'm like, yes, I turned it down.
Well, Amber, I saw you put your hand up a little bit. Did you have a question? No, she's gone quiet now.
Oh.
Hey.
Okay, no, no question. I was applauding. That's all.
Oh, sorry.
Great job, Jamie.
Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I wanted to say as well, like the point you made about selling yourself in kind of the interviews or the chat that you have with companies, that really resonated with me as well, like having interviewed people at, for junior roles and stuff at work. And yeah, I just wanted to say, like, we definitely, when you're looking through someone's portfolio, in your mind you're kind of thinking where you might place them, like what team they might be good working with and what client they might be good working on. So yeah, definitely a good point to really think about what projects you're putting in and what skills you're showing and talking about in your portfolio at the time. I guess obviously there's a lot of similarities in, I guess, the world and the economic climate when you graduated to now, with COVID and oh gosh, everything else that's going on. What would you say has changed in the last 20 years in terms of kind of getting a job? I know you've mentioned before that there was no social media or anything, but are there certain things that have changed and certain things that have stayed the same?
Yeah. So I think what's changed and for the better is that there's so much more transparency with, being able to do research into organizations, businesses. I mean, there was no Glassdoor, there was no LinkedIn, there was nothing, you couldn't really find out anything about the organization other than from their website. And of course, that's going to be like best foot forward, right? And so now I feel like we have the luxury of finding out who the humans are that we're going to talk to, what their backgrounds are, where they've come from, if they have an online presence that's, in addition to their like presence on the company website, finding out more about them and figuring out, it just helps you with that conversation of selling yourself, right? You understand the values of your audience because you can kind of do this research and it's out there for you. And, understanding the organization, I think companies are a lot more transparent on their values and practices and, inclusive nature, right? Like there's so many elements that were kind of like just an unknown. And going into one of the things I really didn't enjoy about that job that I turned down was it felt like this kind of boys club. And I thought, I'm one of like two females here. And it just felt like this kind of frat party atmosphere. And I was like, I don't know about this, and they were all very nice, but it just, I thought that can either be awesome or it can be toxic, and there was no way to kind of like understand because there was no there was no transparency with like the values of the organization. It was all about the work. So I think, you know, it's a lot more three-dimensional now. It's not about, oh, we put out great work, the end. It's more, we put out great work. These are the people who work here. This is the mission and the values of the team and the company and all of that. And I think that it benefits us so much because, you know, if you're going into a conversation and you want to be selling yourself, you at least know who you're talking to, and you don't have to figure it out on the fly, where I think some of my learning curves were just like, as I talk to someone, I'm like reading them and thinking, okay, oh, they said this. Okay, that means they like that. And I'm putting the pieces together in front of them. And that can be, you know, that can create a little anxiety. So if you can do it ahead of time, like you can now, that's you're set, you know, you're set for that conversation, and you can feel confident about the things that you want to discuss with that person. So yeah, I think that's the main one. Just social media too, you know, being able to put yourself out there so they can see you before they talk to you. That's also really important.
Yeah, I guess it takes the edge off as well when you're talking to somebody, you know, a little bit about them, so you can kind of prepare a little bit of small talk sometimes as well, can't you? It takes the edge off your nerves a little bit somehow.
Yeah. And it just like eases you into the dialogue, you know, instead of like, here's my work, like you just, you know, you just go right into the business conversation. You can have a little bit of a sort of a softer opening, and that does make you less nervous.
Yeah. Cool. So Carolina's asked a question. How do you know what roles suit you? I know there's multiple different types of roles you could apply for with one degree. So I guess, did you always know you wanted to go into advertising, or did you kind of apply to lots of different types of companies?
Yeah, so I applied to a lot of different jobs. So essentially what I did was I just looked at the job descriptions, because the title really doesn't do anything for you, right? Like, I mean, it's like a lot of times, you know, it's junior designer, graphic designer, mid-level, like there's so many ways of categorizing the same role. I knew I wanted to go into graphic design. I was also interested in illustration as well. And I had an illustration minor. And so I knew that graphic design was going to be my lead, but I didn't quite know where. So really what I did was I just looked at the job descriptions, like looked at the roles and responsibilities listed, because that's going to tell you more than the title. The title really doesn't say a lot. And so, you know, if you're looking at that and you're thinking, oh, this sounds great, this sounds great, this sounds great, like you want to kind of match yourself to the description of the job instead of the title. I think people get stuck with, well, I want to be an art director. And some art directors, it's like, that's actually not, it's not just because it's an art director, it doesn't mean it's a fit for you. So knowing that, you know, the description of what you're going to be doing every day is the fit, that's how you should choose the roles that you want to apply to. And, you know, the titles, again, like all organizations have different ways of categorizing their titles, and they have different job tiers. So, you know, you might have an art director in one that actually has a higher level salary and more responsibilities than a creative director in another. So just making sure that you're really focusing on what the job actually is and the details of the responsibilities. That's how you can kind of find your fit.
Yeah, absolutely. So CJ's asking, I have a fair amount of imposter syndrome as an artist, which I think is normal for graduates. Do you have any tips on combating that and coming to terms with it?
Oh yeah, that is like, that's everyone. I mean, starting this business, I was like, oh my gosh, can I do this? And someone was like, you've been doing this for 15 years. I'm like, okay, I just need to do it professionally. So it is kind of calming that sort of lizard brain down a little bit, and just recognizing that I'm doing this for a reason. You know, I'm doing this because it's part of like what needs to come out. And sure, there are tons of other people that do it. There is a seat at the table for everyone. That was what someone told me years and years ago when I was really worried about being competitive, and there's other people applying and they might have better experience than I do and worked on bigger brands. And they were like, there's a seat at the table for everyone. There is a place for everyone, no matter what they want to do. Absolutely. I mean, I've worked with so many creatives at this point, especially with this business. You know, there is a place for everyone. And so recognizing that, you know, you're doing this because you love it, because it's part of you, because it's who you are, that you're not an imposter. You know, no, people can't come in and jump into what you do. If they could, you know, everyone would be doing this, right? Because people think it's so fun. It's so fun to be a designer. And it is, right? But there's stress too. There's being any type of a visual artist, there's a lot of stress, and you put pressure on yourself. So, you know, just knowing that there is a seat at the table, and you're going to get where you're going. You just have to stay focused. Don't listen to other people when they tell you you can't do something. You just have to keep going. But imposter syndrome is a tough one. It's really, I have felt that in every role. Every time I get promoted, it's like, oh my God, I don't know. Okay, I'm an art director now. What am I going to do? I don't know. And it's fine. It's fine. You build it up in your head more than, it actually is in reality. So just making sure that you are recognizing, like, I have great skills, like do a skills assessment and then figure out how many of your friends can do all of those things, right? Sometimes you have to build yourself up and remember that you're not a fake. This is what you do. Like, you do this because it is inherent. And so just, focusing on the positives, that gets your brain out of that space, but it does creep up. So I completely understand.
Yeah. And I think especially as creative people, you're kind of putting your heart and soul into something you've created. So, it does come with a lot of kind of heart in it. So, I suffer from imposter syndrome pretty much every time I do a client presentation, because you're worried that they're not going to like it and that you haven't done it right and stuff like that. So you kind of grow with it, don't you, I guess, as well throughout your career.
Do. Yeah. And there's different types of, like, every different, level of your career has a different level of imposter syndrome. It's just like, it's something you're not going to get away from, but you're right. There's an emotional component of what we do, right? We put ourselves out there, and getting that feedback and feeling like, oh my gosh, they don't like it. It probably means I'm not good at this, or I'm not supposed to do this, or I'm a fake. That's not what it means. That's just part of life. It's like that with everyone. It's just more connected to us as individuals, which makes it harder.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So Maddie's asking, what are some green flags that you look for when applying to jobs and interviewing?
Oh yeah, green flags are great. So yeah, the red flags, right? It's like that feeling where you're like, this isn't right. But green flags, okay, so there's a few things. If the conversation feels easy and comfortable and you feel energized, that's awesome, right? If you feel like there is, a connection to the values of the organization or who you're speaking to and yourself, that's a green flag, right? It's anything that makes you feel like, oh, this is a really great fit. This feels like you feel excited. You're not just there to get the paycheck. You actually feel like, okay, yes, like I can see all the pieces kind of fitting together. They're valuing you. That's a huge one. Making sure that who you're speaking with actually values your talent, and they're excited about what you can bring to them, and they're excited about what you do and who you are as a creative individual. That's what you want. You want someone when you start a job to be like, yes, you're finally here. I had that experience in my role as a design manager. My boss hugged me the first day and was like, oh, thank God you're here. And I was like, okay, this is a good start. And I had that feeling throughout the interview too. It was like, this is going to be a great fit. Like, they really are excited about what I bring. I'm excited to help them. It's that, that two-way street and just feeling like it's right, but making sure that they are, they're respectful of you. They are people who they also respect their other employees, right? Like, they're respectful of work-life balance and not wearing you down, and just kind of understanding what the tone of the organization is. Those are all great to look for, but it is that, just like with a red flag, it's like that feeling of feeling like, yes, I feel energized, or I feel kind of drained. And you definitely know the difference. We like to talk ourselves out of the drained. We're like, no, it's fine. It's going to be fine because it pays this much, but you're just going to feel more drained, and then you're going to be hooked in. So looking for that energized feeling is really kind of like your divining rod a little bit.
And I guess that's where websites like Glassdoor are really good. So you can kind of get an insight before you kind of go in there, or work placements as well. So you can kind of peek behind the curtain a little bit and see what it's really like to work for them.
Absolutely. And if you're working with a recruiter, a lot of times they will give you the insight as well. They will tell you the type of culture it is, because they want to make sure that they're fitting you into the right place. So you can kind of get some candid information. You just need to ask.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, and Caroline is asking, so what are the red flags?
Oh, the red flags. Of course, yes. Okay, so the red flags, I have a few posts on red flags on my LinkedIn, and those always do really well because people want to know what to look out for, right? If you're in an interview situation where someone is talking over you, someone is not respecting your opinion or what you bring to the table, they're not quite valuing you right off the bat, it's time to go, right? Because they're treating you like a number, and that's not where you want to start your career. And so, just watching out for how they treat you, how they treat other people. If you're in a group conversation, just, paying attention to the subtle cues, because they might really want to sell you on what they do and you'll be a great fit. They want to like sweep you in. But if you feel a little off, or if you see a dynamic between other people, that doesn't feel right, that's a red flag. Another red flag is, how they're handling the interview. If they're leaving huge gaps of time and not communicating with you, and then all of a sudden a month later, they're like, oh yeah, did you want to come in for another interview? It's like, what, or they ghost you and they don't tell you, what the next steps are. The improper sort of HR practices, those are red flags, because those only get worse when you are hired and you're stuck there and you have to deal with those people and their terrible practices, every day. So just, seeing how they handle the interview, if they're communicative. A lot of interviews will take time, especially, if it's a role where you need to do a presentation, or you have a whiteboard challenge, or, you need to meet multiple people, or you need to meet the team. There might be several rounds, but making sure that they communicate with you in between is critical, because that shows that they value you as a candidate and as a person. And if you work for a company that doesn't value people, it's, you'll know in the first week that it was not a good place to join. So those are some of the ones that, just, you want to go with your gut. Don't talk yourself into things that don't feel right for you. That's just, it never leads to anywhere good.
Yeah. Caroline is asking, she says, I interviewed someone recently that works in a field that I'm interested in. They mentioned that they struggle with being paid the right amount. How would you deal with being underpaid?
Yes. So let's see if this person, so I'm just curious to know a little bit more. I think if someone is telling you, oh yeah, I do this job and I barely make any money, there are all kinds of pay scales. There are all kinds of organizations, and they all pay at different levels. I think what you want to do is you want to focus on, if you feel like you're getting the amount that feels comfortable and you feel valued for what you're giving back, that's what you want to focus on. You don't necessarily want to focus on a certain amount. Like, this person is making X amount of salary, so I should be making that too. You don't really know what the ins and outs of their day-to-day are, right? So I think, you want to focus on what feels good to you as compensation for what you're going to be doing. If this is a really intense job and you feel like I don't think that's enough for what I'm going to be doing, it's probably not. But being underpaid, there are organizations that are just not going to pay well, and just stay away from those, right? That was a little bit of, why I turned down that job too. It was like, I feel like it wasn't a huge salary shift. It wasn't a big bump when I got the offer that I actually took, but it felt more in line with what I was giving versus what I was getting. And so you have to know what that feels like to you. But yeah, being underpaid, it never gets better. And honestly, being overpaid for a job that you hate, that doesn't get better either. Because there is not enough money in the world when you hate your job and you want to get out of it. There really isn't. People think, oh, this is great, 6-figure salary, I'm going to just launch into it. And it's like, and you hate what you're doing, and you hate the people you work with, and you don't enjoy the company environment and the culture. It's just, money doesn't actually solve those things. And, so really making sure that you feel right about what you're giving versus what you're getting, that's really the only way to deal with it. And I wouldn't listen to someone who struggles, because everyone has a horror story. Just take it with a grain of salt. Everyone has a horror story about that thing, right? Like, people have horror stories about giving birth, and yet everyone still has children. So it's totally okay to ignore that and know that, like, no, I want to make this much and I'm going to look for that. And that is absolutely fine, because you will find it if you keep looking.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And I'm curious to learn a bit more about you said you kind of had a career plan, like you sort of knew kind of where you wanted to be when did you sort of start to draw that up, and how did you kind of make sure you were sort of meeting your goals, I guess, along the way? Like, when did you know it was time to move on and things like
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah, totally. So I think I sort of developed a roadmap in my senior year. And because what I wanted to do was understand, okay, if I'm going to be a graphic designer, what does the career path look like? So I know in an organization what the next step would be for me, and if that organization has that available. And so that was that also sort of helped me know when it was time to move on, because if I was in a role, I was in a lead designer role, and there was no upward mobility at all. I was managing the designers, I was managing the interns, I was managing the freelancers, and there was no art director position. There just wasn't that the organization didn't have anything like that. And I thought, okay, well, it's time to go, because I know I want to be a design manager, an art director, something like that. And it doesn't exist here. And even though I really enjoyed the work, I felt like I don't want to just, end my career here and just stay here for 20 years. Like, I want to challenge myself further. So I think knowing what the options are in advance helps you determine in the job when it's time to move on. Because okay, well, I know I wanted to get to this level, and I'm not there yet, and they don't offer it here. The other side of the coin is thinking that you want to move into leadership and then not realizing, like, I don't actually want that. I want to stay in design. I want to be hands-on. I want to do the work. I don't want to manage the work and manage the people doing the work. I want to actually do it. And that is totally fine too. There is nothing wrong with someone who doesn't want to move up into leadership roles. That's it. That's absolutely okay. You have to find your space that like really energizes you and fulfills all those needs and gives you kind of that like creative life. If you feel like you're being worn down in leadership and you want to go back to, doing more hands-on work, that's fine too. I work with a lot of people that boomerang, as we call it, where they go to leadership and they don't like it. And they're like, I think I need to find something else that is actually, more of what I actually enjoy. And so just kind of knowing yourself and what fuels you as a designer and a creative person, that will help you make the right decisions, and not talking yourself into something because like you saw a big salary and you feel like you should because your parents or your significant other or someone told you, like, isn't it time you moved up into leadership? That's not for everyone. And a big salary there's more responsibilities where the salary is. So you're not just making that extra money and doing the same work. It's a lot more. And if you don't enjoy it, it's going to feel really stressful. So
yeah, I agree. I know a few people myself who have gone into management roles and come back again because they missed the design element, they kind of moved away from that more hands-on creative role. So or they moved into planning as well. So I guess that's another great thing about the creative industry, is that you can kind of move around. Like, a lot of your skills are transferable to lots of different sectors within the same sort of umbrella. So so I think that's something that companies either get really, really right or really, really wrong, is when they're writing their job descriptions, because I think they can put a lot of people off or make people think that they can't apply for them, especially at a junior level, because they need to sort of explain that you're going to be mentored. We're not looking for the finished article. We're looking for people who just have great ideas and who have potential at that stage as well.
Yes. That's the most critical thing, is that, you're presenting yourself as a creative thinker, someone who's going to go the extra mile, someone who's going to like really be, flexible and adaptable and just like willing to learn. That's what you look for in any sort of entry level, role, filling a role. That's really what you want, is someone who's just excited to be there. Like that's the enthusiasm counts for a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you've touched on making sure you stand out and telling your story and things like that. And you'd be amazed at the amount of people who apply for internships or apply for junior roles, and they've just put no effort in whatsoever. They haven't got the right name. They've titled it like "Dear Sir, Madam," or like a really formal kind of letter. They've just bunged a load of projects in that have nothing to do with what we do. There's basic things that you can do to just like hook people in straight away, and they just don't do it. So as much as I think when you are coming up to graduation, it's scary because you're going into the world by yourself for the first time. It's like, okay, I've done all this education stuff, now I have to actually get a real job and support myself. And so there's a lot of pressure anyway, like on top of everything that's happening with COVID, with economic crisis, all that kind of stuff. So I think all the points that you've kind of touched on are really important, because even if you do half of them, like you're ahead of a lot of other people who don't bother.
Yes, absolutely. Effort is noticed. It really is, because you would be surprised how many people don't actually make the effort. A lot. It's a large percentage. And this is not just, entry level. This is all the way up through leadership roles. There are people don't put the effort in. And so when you do, and you send them something like this, or you present something, or you think outside the box, a way to get their attention, they're going to notice, because that is not something that people do. So it really is about the effort and the enthusiasm, like those two things together, you cannot miss. Like you will hit the mark every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think, as you say, like, the thing that you sent out, you're putting your skills into context. You're designing a physical printed thing. Right. To display that information, which is what a designer does. So
right. And I, with this, like, I knew I was interested in doing like packaging design. And so I thought, okay, well, this is an example of what I want to do. Right. So I'm showing you what I can do and using it for myself. And so, it's just that sort of creative thinking that, gets you the conversation with someone, and the info interview, and just being able to get in front of someone. And even if they don't have a role, they're going to remember you when they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And can I ask, like, what was your biggest anxiety when you graduated? What were you sort of worrying about?
Oh, I mean, aside from like, getting a job and paying the bills, like I was really worried that I wasn't going to find somewhere that would allow me to do all of the things I wanted to do, like to use all of my skills. And, I really enjoyed like writing copy. I really enjoyed figuring out, processes. I really enjoyed like making things, and like making, figuring this out, like, okay, well, how would this fit? And is there a label on the inside? And, just kind of all of these different things. I didn't want to be in a role that felt like it was just like holding me back, because I was very ready to go. And I really wanted something a place that would support me. And I thought, I don't know, because again, right, the stories you hear these horror stories, oh, this agency that you don't do anything but get coffee for all the creative directors, and then maybe you do some production work. And I thought, I don't know, I don't want to do that. Like, that just sounds like worse than working at the jewelry store. So I thought, I'm gonna keep rolling and like find a place that will support me in the way that I want, and will actively like help me grow as a creative. And I did, it took some time and some, stress and tears, but I did find that. But that was the thing I was the most worried about. And one of the reasons why I turned that job down. Just, I didn't want to feel like I was held back, because I felt like I had been free. Like I'm out of school. I'm free to do what I want. Like, this is so exciting. And I want to make an impact in the world. And I didn't want to be like shoved in a back room with a photocopier, just doing like administrative stuff for some creative director who didn't want to do it himself, so that was my fear. And I just made sure that I was like, no, I'm not going to accept that for my life. So yeah.
That's great. That's a great level of self-awareness and confidence.
I mean, it sounds like, oh, it's a straight line. It was not a straight line. It was like all over the place. And yeah, you have those days where you're like, I don't even know if I could do this. I don't know if anyone's going to hire me to do this, and it's like, no, they are. Just keep going. That is like the advice I give everyone. It's like, if there's one thing, just keep going, keep refining, keep improving. You're going to get there if you keep going. Like, absolutely. I mean, I've done it multiple times and I've seen other people do it. So yeah, that's the thing. It's a trick. A lot of people stop, they give up. And so they, drop out of the race, and you're still running. And eventually there's not going to be that many people running after all these people have dropped out. So just keep going.
Yeah, definitely. And what are the things that people come to you at Rock That Creative Job? What are they sort of coming to you for? What are they kind of searching for when they first start talking to you?
Yeah, a lot of people have trouble getting noticed. That really is the thing that they come to me for. They've been applying, they haven't gotten any feedback, they haven't gotten anything. It's been radio silence. And they've been struggling for 6 months to send out resumes and links to their portfolio, and they don't really know what they've done wrong. And usually I can pinpoint it immediately, like, okay, here's what you're missing. There's a lot of times there's like one thing, there's a gap, or they're underselling themselves. They're not, after talking to people, it's like, these are talented people. Like, it's ridiculous that they're not working, but they're missing the sales component of what they do. And that's what I help them with, is that sales component of putting yourself out there in a way that gets noticed, saying the right things to the right audience, knowing how to present yourself in a way that reflects your values, but also piques people's interest. That's really what I kind of help people with, because it is a struggle sometimes. You're just sending things out, you're not hearing back, and then the imposter syndrome just starts to creep up again, and you feel like you're never going to get a job doing this. And it's very deflating to put your work out there and then get nothing, right? And so that's a lot of what I help people with, is figuring out how to move through that, move over it. Like it's a hurdle. But the sales piece is one that a lot of creatives forget. They completely forget that that's a thing. And if you want someone to buy something, you have to know what you're actually selling. And so I help people with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. We've got another question from Maddie. So what's something you wish you could have told your younger self about building your career?
Oh my God, that nothing is a straight line. The research that I did to figure out, okay, well, what are all the roles from graphic designer to, like head of a department? It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to go from this to this to this. And it's like, sometimes you have to take a little step off the side and you go back in, and, it is this crazy wild ride. It's not like you just move up. And mine was pretty, like, it looks pretty linear on LinkedIn. It looks linear, but there's a lot of in between there, right? There's layoffs, there's acquisitions, there's all kinds of things that happen that make you like take a step back and refigure things out. And so just really recognizing that it's, you might expect that there's this like glorious fanfare for your next step, but it's really all about it. The motivation has to be internal. You have to really want it, and you have to just keep going until you get it. And I definitely kind of thought, oh no, this will be great. Like I have this path and I'm just going to move on it. And I would get really, like upset at myself that I wasn't moving fast enough, or that I wasn't like achieving that next thing, or that I was stuck in a job that I didn't like and I couldn't get out of it. It's like, those things are going to happen. It's part of life. And, 50% is awesome. And 50% is stuff you have to navigate. So yeah, that's really what it is. Just knowing that it's not a straight line, and that is totally okay, because it's not a straight line for anybody. I mean, they make, LinkedIn makes it look a lot glossier than it is.
Yeah, I must admit, I am so glad I didn't graduate when social media was a thing, because it's hard enough dealing with your own imposter syndrome and thinking, oh, I've been a graduate for 3 months, I haven't got a job yet, I've failed, and then you've got to deal with everyone plastering all their success in front of you every single day, and it's just, it's not reality, but it just makes it harder, doesn't it?
Yeah, I have a thought on imposter syndrome too. CJ asked that question about imposter syndrome, and the social, what made me think about it was your comment on social media, the comparison, the endless comparison to you, for you to other people, people ahead of you, people at your same level, constant comparison. That is what social media gives us. And sometimes it's great and inspiring, and you're like, wow, this is awesome. This person did this thing, I could do that too. And then sometimes it goes the other way if you're doing too much of it. So I would suggest just don't compare yourself to other people, because no true creatives are alike. No true creatives think alike. No true creatives create alike. You are completely unique we are all the special snowflakes, right? And so remembering that like what you do is totally unique to who you are. Comparing yourself is not going to help you get better at what you do, and it's not going to make you feel better about where you're trying to go. So, you know, you just, at a certain point, you just kind of have to stop at looking at what other people do. Just don't go down that rabbit hole of looking at portfolios and constantly wonder, like looking at their LinkedIn and, oh, this person has a job and got promoted, and right, like it doesn't do anything great for your self-esteem, and there's no reason for it, because you're not going to do creative work like that person because you have a different brain. So it really doesn't matter what they do. You know, for creatives, it is not apples to apples like in other industries where, you know, you're in finance, and so it's pretty straightforward. Like we are totally unique in what we do. So just remember that. Don't compare yourself, because that goes a bad direction.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, people don't put their failures up on social media.
No.
Some people do, but yeah, it's like companies, you know, companies are going to tell you how many clients they have. They're not going to tell you how many clients they've lost or projects that didn't go right, and where the client didn't like anything they've done. Like it happens all the time. People don't talk about that.
All the time. Absolutely. Yeah. They're not, because you want people to see you as someone who is achieving goals and like moving forward. And, you know, your businesses aren't going to sell themselves. You know, they're not going to get new clients by telling, you know, potential clients that they lost clients. And it's just like, you know, that's just the human experience, right? Like some of it's good, some of it's not so great. So yeah, you just have to remember that, you know, the comparison doesn't really do anything, especially when you're comparing it to like the 3% of things that people do that are actually awesome. And then there's the 97% of the behind the scenes that sucks. And you don't see that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Everyone's applied for like 900 jobs and got the one. Everyone. So
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, last shout out for any other last minute questions. If not, we'll wrap this up, but do check out Rock That Creative Job. I've put Jamie's LinkedIn in the chat as well, and have a look at Turnheads as well. We do try and do a lot of these chats where we get people from industry to come in and kind of just explain what it's like, you know, in the job role that they do, and kind of report back to you on what their journey's been like, really. So yeah, do come along and join the community. But other than that, I don't think there's any other questions. So thank you so much, Jamie. It's been really great. So many great tips in there. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it was great. I'm really glad to do this, and I just make sure everyone knows that like you're gonna get where you're going. Just keep going. Just keep going.
Yeah, just keep swimming.
Yeah, totally. That's totally it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We hope you've got you know, taken a lot away from that, and we'll hopefully see you next time at the next event.